General Motors was founded on September 16, 1908. But the journey for the U.S. icon has been full of ups and downs. From early boardroom battles that saw its founder, William C. Durant, ousted in 1910, to its 2009 Chapter 11 filing that saw its stock removed from the Dow and Washington bailing out the automaker to the tune of $50 billion. Of course, as you would expect in a company with over a century's worth of history, there were good times too. For 77 consecutive years, GM led the world in vehicle sales. Those aspirations are now firmly back in place under the stewardship of CEO Mary Barra. She's held the top spot at GM for just over a year now, but her career at the company started much earlier. In fact, it's the only place she's ever worked, having started at the age of 18 as a co-op student. But Mary Barra's tenure has had speed bumps. 2014 may go down in history as the year of the recall, with over 30 million vehicles having to go back to the shop.
This is an extraordinary situation. It involves vehicles we no longer make. But it came to light on my watch, so it is my responsibility to resolve it.
So what's set to change at GM? What does the future hold? And are the recalls really over? CNBC's Becky Quick sits down for a CNBC conversation.
Mary Barra is our guest today, the CEO of General Motors. And Mary, let's jump right into this conversation. You are just about a year into your job. You spent your entire life, your entire career at GM, but I have to think that things look a little bit different from the top. Obviously, it wasn't the year you were expecting, but what have you learned in that first year?
Well, obviously we faced a big challenge, and, I think we've really quickly, though, started demonstrating and living our values of really putting the customer first. So every action we took last year was to make sure we not only did the right thing for the customer, we were transparent about it, and then really we're open about taking the learnings and driving it into the company. So it's really been something that we've been able to accelerate behavior change, culture change from the learnings to make sure it never happens again.
In terms of accelerating the culture change, what are some specifics that you've put in place, things that you can point to and say, this is something we do differently today than we did a year ago?
Well, one is a complete commitment to safety of our vehicles. And so we've completely changed, and I would say taken to a higher level, our whole vehicle development process, the way we validate vehicles. And we looked externally. So we went to the aerospace, to the nuclear industry to say, a different perspective on safety. How do we incorporate that into the way we develop vehicles? And so that's one measurable change. Then as you look at how do we change cultures, we've changed the way we compensate, we've changed the way we do performance appraisals, and we've even changed and have much better engagement in the way we do our strategic planning.
Just a few weeks into your tenure, you announced the first of what would become 84 recalls that affected 27 million cars in the United States. It's GM that's doing these recalls, but other car companies have increased the number of recalls too. I just wonder if you think 2015 is a new year, or have we seen the bulk of these recalls, or is this a new way of doing business in the industry as regulators really clamp down and as the global supply chain consolidates?
Well, I think you have to look at two different aspects going on that drove last year. One, as we learned the lesson of the problem that we found, we wanted to go make sure, and we went through our entire car park and really looked at vehicles that were manufactured in the late 90s. So that's how far we went back, which drove some of those numbers, because we really wanted to make sure once we understood the issue that we were comprehensive in looking at the vehicles on the road. I would say going forward, I think I will completely support doing a recall, because we're going to be focused on the customer. If we find an issue, but what you've seen now in the last, 4, 5, 6 months is, maybe the numbers have gone down, but what's more important is the number of vehicles. Because in addition, we put a lot of analytical tools. We're actually leveraging IBM Watson to make sure that when we see a butt of an issue where in the past we may have had to wait for more data to understand it, we're quickly finding it. And, we're finding issues with recalls, several recalls with less than 100 vehicles. So I'm not obviously I want to get to a place where we have the safest vehicles and we're not doing recalls, and that's the changes that we've made to our development process. But as we see issues, we're going to take care of them.
You were the public face of this. You got out in front of everything that happened over the last year. What was the toughest moment for you?
You know, I think, first of all, I was supported by a great team. And so I knew that there was a great group of people behind me that were supporting me. And then the other thing, every time I spoke publicly, I was also speaking to the men and women of General Motors. So I was not only talking to them, but representing them. So I really, you know, I took it as that. So I didn't, obviously there was a personal impact, but I always, you know, knew that I was representing all those people who work so hard every day for the company.
Okay, let's talk about some of the issues that are in the news right now. Gas prices down significantly in the United States, down about 50% from where we saw just a year ago. What do you look at in terms of this? What does it mean for you and what consumers are looking for? Are they coming in looking for bigger trucks and SUVs right off the bat?
Well, you know, it's really interesting because we are, you know, obviously we want to respond to what customers want. So we're going to seize and love having a challenge of not having enough of a certain vehicle, whether it's a full-size SUVs or a truck. And we just launched a brand new mid-size truck. So we're, you know, you know, we'll seize those opportunities. But long-term, you know, and it's been interesting being here because there, for about as many people we have here, there's that many opinions of when it will change, when the price will change. It doesn't affect our long-term strategy because it's a much broader of what when we're looking at efficiency, fuel efficiency, electrification, because it's solving broader problems than just the cost of fuel, environmental congestion, et cetera, and across the globe. So we aren't changing our long-term strategy at all. Of course, you know, we're going to continue to sense and respond and learn as we all will. And then we'll be focused on meeting customers' needs in the short term, but not changing our longer-term development.
The longer-term development in terms of the electric cars.
Electric car,
yeah.
and all efficiency, you know, starting with lightweighting. You know, we've done massive work on lightweighting vehicles, every component, electrification, you know, fuel efficiency across the board.
How much of that is because of what governments have asked for or required, and how much of that is because you think it's what consumers want?
You know, clearly, when you go across the globe, whether you're in Brazil or China or Europe or North America, you know, there's regulatory requirements, and, you know, we're going to meet those, and we want to do it as efficiently as possible because that's the way we think we can serve the customer and then meet not only what the customer wants and give them the choice of vehicles, but also meet the societal needs as well. So it is a two-prong, and you know, the opportunity that we can have to have those come together, I think it benefits everyone.
You've got a really good idea of what's happening with consumers around the globe. Where do we stand right now?
Well, you know, in general, the consumer, when you look at it, a car or truck or crossover purchase for most people is the most important or second most important purchase that they make. And so if they start to feel uncertainty, you know, it's a decision, a purchase decision that they will back off on. What I've observed over the last couple years is the consumers around the globe are getting used to a higher level of you know, I'll say uncertainty as global economic forces, but you know, if the spikes get too wide, you know, it'll have an effect, and we definitely see it in the auto industry.
You see sales pulling back because consumers are a little unnerved by what they say?
You know, I think it's too soon with some of the issues right now. I mean, you know, when we look at the opportunity, there's still we see growth opportunities in China, even if it's single digit as opposed to double digit. You know, in the U.S., there's you know, good solid growth that we've had since the 08-09 time frame. In Europe, obviously, a strong economy is going to benefit the recovery that we have with the Opel brand. We've gained share for 2 years in a row. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as we move forward, if the volatility and the spikes, you know, continue, then at some point customers will say, "Whoa, this is higher than my new level of what I expect."
What are your forecasts for Europe for this year? Because that's probably the biggest question on people's minds when you look at economies around the globe.
You know, we think the market. Relatively flat or somewhat, a lot will depend on what happens. So we see it as fragile. You know, from a GM specific perspective, we have a very important launch of the Corsa that we just brought out at the end of last year. We have another important launch coming later in the year. So we'll hope to, whatever the market conditions are of the industry, to seize the opportunity of some pretty exciting new products.
What new products can you expect from GM? Mary Barra reveals all when we return on the CNBC Conversation.
It's the customer, it's governments coming together, it's infrastructure. So it's all going to come together. We think there's going to be more change in this industry in the next 5 to 10 years than there has been in the last 50.
We have heard an awful lot about self-driving cars. That seems to be all the rage these days, and I will admit that it looks like a much more close to reality type of scenario than I would have thought even a year ago. What do you think about the future of autonomous driving cars?
Well, I definitely think you can buy cars right now that have many, I'll say driver assist features on the pathway to autonomous. So, and it creates value because it creates, it's improved safety, whether it's stopping you if something happens and you're going, there's going to be an accident from a front impact, back, the ability to see what, an individual sitting in the driver's seat can't see, lane detection, etc. And all those technologies are available today and on many of our products. As we look forward, we're, I think, the first OEM by next calendar year for 17 models. We're going to be putting V2V or vehicle-to-vehicle communications capability in the vehicle, because for it to truly be successful over the long term, and you look at the infrastructures here, the road systems versus New York versus China, you've got to have that communication ability with the infrastructure to have the safety level that I think we'll all want and require. But, we're on that journey. We'll also, next year for 17 model year, be actually putting out technology on an advanced Cadillac where you can take your hands off the wheel, feet off the pedals. You still need to stay engaged, but again, to experience it, because part of the road to autonomous is also customer acceptance. So we believe in it. We're on that journey. We have many of the features right now, and in some cases, we have a leadership position.
The first mass autonomous car, is it going to be sold by GM or by Google?
Remains to be seen. Remains to be seen.
When you say you can take your hands off and your feet off, but still have to pay attention, what does that mean? Can I be putting on my makeup while I'm doing this, or reading?
Probably. I think all the regulators and probably all the fellow drivers would prefer you don't. But I think it's just we want people to be alert, because there still is the unexpected. It's one thing to be on a highway, and even in stop and go traffic, the technology can adapt to that, but it's the unknown. So we still need that engagement. Frankly, the regulations require that. We, I think, have a pretty innovative way to do that, which we'll be able to share next year.
Next year?
Yes.
So it's really in the works. It's really coming.
Oh, yeah.
If I was thinking about a car that I really could just have it drive me to work without a driver, not paying any attention to it, when do you think that actually hits? Is that 5 years down the road, 10 years, 15?
We've spent time talking about that, and actually had, broader than the auto industry, many different industries that will be impacted. And, our conclusion was no one knows. I think we'll continue to see the journey, though, with the technology. It's the customer, it's governments coming together, it's infrastructure. So it's all going to come together, and I think we'll see measurable progress each year.
Here's a weird question for you, and I try and figure out what this means. If I have a self-driving car, do I still have to pay for car insurance?
Well, if you, they were involved in the conversation as well, and if you look, there still is, issues that happen from a car that are unrelated to driving, whether it's storm-related, theft, etc. So I think there's still going to be the role of the consumer. Okay. But I think there's dimensions that will change.
Yeah, I just wonder if the collision cost goes back to you as the manufacturer.
Well, that's one of the things we're talking about right now. And, how do we enable the technology and incent everyone, because it's really a systems. I mean, I think the thing that you look at transportation now, to drive the efficiencies and the safety that we want, you've got to look at it from a systems perspective, even from an environmental perspective. It's a systems level, and so as we do that together, we can, I think, make it more efficient.
While we're talking about technology, let's also talk about Uber and some of these ride-sharing applications. I just wonder if you see that as a threat, as something that will keep younger people from buying cars down the road, and whether that in turn will affect auto sales overall.
Well, the way I look at it, and I've said publicly that, and we're working on it as a company, we think there's going to be more change in this industry in the next 5 to 10 years than there has been in the last 50. And, as it relates to people making that choice to say, for this point of my life, for where I live, for what I do I need car ownership, or how do we drive that effectively? And so I think there's going to be a lot of change, but there's still, at the end of the day, going to be a need to get from point A to point B. And at General Motors, we plan on participating in it heavily, and hopefully doing it in a way where we provide the most value, that the customer, selects the moves with us.
Right. I mean, I just wonder, because we see so much of it in urban areas in particular. You see younger people moving back to cities, but you guys have had conversations about this too and thought about it?
Oh, absolutely. Spent quite a bit of time on it. Again, it's a very competitive area. The auto industry itself is an incredibly competitive industry, and now you're bringing in a lot of others. So, it's something that we're working on, but not talking a lot externally. But then I think you also have to, step out of the urban developed markets and look at the role of a vehicle in countries that, developing countries, whether it's China, whether it's India, across the globe, and what that means to enable people to, have work, education, just provides advancement. So I also think it's going to move at different paces, but also recognizing quite often those that don't have it skip several generations. They don't go through the 30-year journey that they may jump quicker. But, there's cost implications as well.
Yeah, just a growing middle class in other places.
Exactly.
Kind of takes up some of the slack.
Can the new generation take up the mantle of leadership? Mary Barra shares career advice and reveals what she really thinks of tech companies moving into the auto space.
If we have strong partnerships and we define the role, there's an opportunity to work together well. But obviously, they've got their, business plans and agendas as well. And so in some cases that puts us as a competitor.
I saw a post that you recently wrote on LinkedIn just about how millennials are looking at something like 15 to 20 different jobs that they'll have over the course of their career. You're somebody who spent your whole career at GM. What can you tell some of these millennials? What advice would you give them in terms of what to take out of each of these jobs?
Well, and I would say, working for General Motors, which is a fairly large company, I feel like I've had many careers within. I mean, when you look at my career, I've worked in product development, I've worked in HR, I've worked in communications, ran an assembly plant, and so I feel like I've had many careers. Happens to be within one company. But the advice I give to anyone is, first of all, do what you're passionate about, because you're going to work hard, and why not be happy and feel like you're making a difference? And then I'm a big believer in engaging people. I truly believe it leads to bottom line performance. If you have an engaged workforce that feels valued, you're just going to have superior results. So those would be two quick things I would recommend.
You pointed out that you've had maybe 12 or 15 different jobs at GM. One of those was engineering. Some of that was product design. You've described yourself as a car girl before.
Others have described me as a car girl. I usually say I'm a person who loves vehicles. I'm a second-generation General Motors employee. Yeah, my dad was a die maker, so I grew up in the industry, grew up around cars. I think it's kind of in your blood. At least it is for me. It's not an industry for the weak at heart, but it is an incredibly exciting industry, because we do get to participate in what is a very important purchase for people, and what the vehicle means. I mean, many products you buy you don't name, so it's exciting. So I love it, but it's a dynamic industry.
So what car do you actually drive yourself right now?
Well, one of the beauties of my job is I get to drive almost any car I'd like. So I mean, again, when I look at it, and having spent my time in product development, I feel that each one had a specific role in the portfolio for their target customer, whether you're talking about a Chevrolet Spark all the way up to the Cadillac CTS, which I think is one of the most advanced vehicles we've ever done. And we've gotten a lot of external recognition for the technical capability of that vehicle. I also like driving trucks and SUVs, so like I said, that's one of the benefits of this job. And so from a person who loves vehicles, it's a perfect match.
I understand that. We love all our children equally, but what's sitting in your driveway?
Right. Very good. My husband and I have always been a Camaro fan, so I love the Camaro. I think between my husband and I, we've owned each generation. We have one right now. And then just, being a working mother with two teenagers, I love an Escalade, Cadillac Escalade, because it's like my working office. So I would say those are the two that I spend most of my time in.
What's caught you by surprise in terms of things that you're doing that you didn't expect, or things you're not doing that you thought would take up more of your time?
I think, I wouldn't say it surprised me, but as I got into it, of just the importance of having strong relationships, with, again, our suppliers, with our investors, our owners, with the media. So, also, because again, you're such an important part of helping everybody understand where we're going. And so I think just it was reinforced to me how important that is, and that it's very important to spend the time.
Some of the things that you've told some of those constituencies recently have been talking about what you're planning on spending. You're putting an extra 20% into capital expenditures, I think, raising it to $9 billion. Where is that money going to go?
Well, if you look at it, all the technology and the fact that I've indicated that over the next 5 to 10 years, I think the industry will change more in the last 50, that doesn't happen for free. And so, whether it's more efficient powertrains, new design, new vehicles, I mean, some of that is going into new segments, also investing into new markets. And so it's not only technology, but opportunities to improve the operations to reach new customers. So it's really a blend of all of that.
Who would you consider your biggest competitor right now?
You know, as I look at the main global players in the auto industry, I don't dismiss any of them. I think they're all very capable. You look at the quality of vehicles, where they're headed, technology. So I don't single out one or two. I have tremendous respect for many of them. Also, though, there's other, non-traditional OEMs that are into this space as well. As you mentioned, the Googles, Uber, et cetera. And so, I think, again, that's why this industry is so dynamic, is not only it's a very capable competitive set, but there's other industries looking for how do they participate, especially as you see the consumer electronics type of industry moving into the vehicle, and because it provides customer value.
Yeah, the Apples of the world, the Googles of the world, are they companies that you consider people that you work with, or are they considered competitors at this point?
Well, I think we do both. I think we work with them and have important projects, and I think if we have strong partnerships and we define the role, there's an opportunity to work together well. But obviously, they've got their, business plans and agendas as well. And so in some cases that puts us as a competitor. But I think even you see that in the auto industry. There's a lot of alliance and partnerships, but then there's times where we're, directly competing. And so you've just got to be able to live in that world.
All right. Well, Mary, I want to thank you very much for your time today, and I'd like to thank the audience for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks, Becky.
Thanks,